The religion of the Cushites is quite interesting. One of the important deities was Amen. Now, Amen is the pronunciation that the Hebrews give it, and some scholars agree to use that pronunciation. Amun is the pronunciation given to it by one of the old European scholars, Plutarch.
In the language of Kemet, the word for hidden is Imen, or Amun is the way that we put it in English. And Amun is the name of a goddess creator who is everywhere and hidden, combined with Ra'ah, who's the energy of the sun. That's the metaphor for the creator, so Amun Ra'ah. But Amun is the hidden part, very much like the Christian, Jewish, Muslim concept of God as everywhere and invisible.
The sun, the symbol of the creator, was reborn every morning. It reached its highest position in the day at noon, where it was known as Re. Re represented the creator, God, the sustainer of life on high at its highest point. When the sun set in the west, it was known as Amen. Amen is a Kemetic word which means hidden or concealed.
Amen was supposed to be unseen and therefore very all-powerful also, because Amen was responsible for creation. Amen was responsible for everything, knew everything, understood everything, could foretell everything, and so on, the great omnipotent and omnipresent divinity.
At this religious center, one of the main temples that is still here to be seen today was a temple that was dedicated to Amun. The ram was a sign that was always associated to the worship of Amun. It has been claimed that during the time of these temples, it was the astrological age of the ram, what we know as Aries, and that's why the ram was represented.
They all worshipped God Amun, who was the same god as in Egypt, the state god of the pharaohs, whose main temple was in fact in Napata.
Their deity Amen, they make it quite clear. Amen is a deity coming from Cush. And then during the Cushite Golden Age, they resurrect that same belief system, and then they build monuments sacred to Amen, and then Amen's wife, or Amen's consort, Mut. Mut was the goddess of Amen. What's important here is that same site, the Egyptians had their belief that that's where Amen and Mut came from. So that becomes a very, very important center.
Within the African systems, be they in Kemet, be they in Núbio, or be they in Kush, the male god has an equal and opposite female god. We see this representation in all African cultural systems that flow.
Every Netcher in Kemet had his female counterpart. So I reference a Sar and a Set. They were Netcher who complemented each other. They were co-equals.
They are usually together in families, producing children. We have a man and a woman and a child produced as the union.
We tend to think of the deities as a family. It's not quite so biological, it's more religious.
In the beginning there was only noon, the original ocean of chaos that contained the beginning of everything to come. Ra, the sun, was born and appeared to rise from the surface of the water. Ra then gave birth to two children, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Shu and Tefnut then had two more children, Nut, the goddess of sky, and Geb, the god of earth, and so with them the physical universe was created. From the union of Geb and Nut, 4 human children were born, and so the story of civilization begun.
The Egyptian creation story, in many respects, represents the development of a civilization and the growing of Egypt, I suppose. And it's coming out of something that's very simple and coming out of nature, and then is being developed by man and being developed also into obviously one of the greatest civilizations that there ever was.
The spiritual world represented the physical world. So as it was in heaven, so as it was on earth. The Africans came together in Kemet to build a heaven on earth.
So what you see is this combination of balance and harmony. The essence of what we find within traditional African society is an understanding of the totality of life that is literally matrilineal and is paired with the masculine energy in order to maintain its force and its operation throughout society. If you suppress the female, you suppress 50% of the power of the creator.
It seems to be really important, and in many respects the sort of male and female seem to represent the two different forces coming together. And I suppose it's a bit like the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt in some respects.
Because they understood that it wasn't just about gender. It was about the understanding of the energy and how it moves, how masculine energy moves and how feminine energy moves, and how to marry the two, which created balance, life.
The idea was to create a land which was like the land that was up in the skies and beneath the earth. And in that sense, they saw that how they were arranged in families was also how the gods must also be arranged in families, and how the spiritual energies of the universe must also be arranged in families because they are arranged in families.
Three of the most important Neteru in Kemet were Asar, Aset, and Heru.
Or to give them the more usual names, Osiris, Isis, and Horus. These three deities originally came from Kush.
These are very, very important triumvirate.
Their stories are as much mythology as they are history.
Now, according to Diodorus Siculus, who was one of the ancient Greek historians, Osiris was originally a community leader of very early Kush. He doesn't call him a king of Kush, but he makes it quite clear he was a leader.
Asar is regarded as the founding father of Kemet. He unified the two lands. He established the first nation-state in the recorded history of humanity. He is said to have introduced writing, the writing which the ancient Kemites referred to as Medu Neter, or the writing of God when it was written, or the words of God when it was spoken. He is also said to have introduced agriculture and theology.
Also decided to take civilization to certain parts of the Nile Valley as well as to other parts of the world.
Asar married a beautiful Nubian woman by the name of Aset, who was his co-regent, not his inferior, his co-regent. And when Asar decided that he was going to travel to other parts of Africa to share his technology with his brothers and sisters on the continent, he left his wife Aset to run their nation.
And he was very successful, very admired, and this provoked the jealousy of his brother, Set.
And Set then plotted to overthrow his brother Asar.
Set, or Sete in ancient Egyptians, murdered his brother, dismembered his body into 14 pieces, and then scattered those 14 pieces throughout Kemet.
When Aset learned of the murder and dismemberment of her husband, she fled for her life, and then she went searching for the missing parts of her husband's body. Aset found 13 of the 14 parts of Asar's body, and as she found each body part, she cleaned it, she anointed it with oils, and she laid all 13 parts out, and she literally remembered her husband, wrapped his entire body in bandages, and created the first mummy in the recorded history of humanity. As Aset was preparing to bury her husband, she grieved because she was about to bury the man that she loved. She grieved because she was still a virgin. They had never consummated their marriage, and thus she would never bear children by the man that she loved. And according to the story written on many papyri in Kemet, carved on several temples in Kemet, the spirit of Asar came and impregnated his virgin wife Aset. And then 9 months later, the virgin of Set, gave birth to their son Heru.
Now, in the case of Isis or Set, she is the original Virgin Mother, and she is seen suckling Horus. He is shown as a child suckling his mother, and he's wearing the pharaonic headdress, making it clear that he was born a king.
Heru is the son of Osiris, and he's the embodiment of order. He has to take over the kingship, and he has to do that through a struggle.
So Heru was born, the son of a virgin. He was born with a specific purpose in life. That was to restore his father's kingdom, to do battle with his uncle Set and reclaim his father's throne.
Heru would then take up his father's struggle, in a way, against his uncle Set.
One of those classic battles, not so much between good and evil, it's more a battle between order and anarchy.
And Heru eventually triumphs over Set.
At that moment, Heru was transformed, miraculously transformed into a falcon. He flew into heaven to meet with his father Asar, told Asar of his victory over Set. His father blessed him, and Heru then returned to Kemet as the legitimate heir to the throne. And when he ascended to the throne, the symbol of the Heru Badet, the winged sun disk, was a symbol that was carved above the entrance of every temple in Kemet to serve as a reminder of Heru fulfilling the reasons for which he was born. And at the moment Heru reclaimed his father's throne and was crowned the king of Kemet, his father Asar was resurrected from the dead and took his place on the throne of judgment.
According to Plutarch, what he says about Osiris is that Osiris was associated with the moon, and the moon has its lunar cycle and then disappears at the end of the lunar month, and then 3 days later is then reborn, and this is then the resurrection of Osiris after being dead for 3 days. So Osiris is then the god of death and resurrection.
And Seth, or Zetesh, is never thrown away. He's an important part of the whole series of gods. He's not the annihilating factor.
Set was not purely evil. Set represented the forces of discordance.
Zetesh still has to be there. If you take him away, you're taking away part of reality. But he shouldn't be king. So that balance between Hor and Zetesh is one where Hor, Heru, is meant to be very much on top and ruling.
And our ancestors were very inclusive. And they knew for certain that, as I said, there was a little bit of good in the worst of us and a little bit of bad in the best of us. And they represented that in this way.
So the reigning ruler in Kemet, and this is taken over to an extent in Kush, the reigning king is Horus, because he's managed to take over and rule.